Before we do that, however, move on to our next question, there is a microphone for you, man. If I could ask you to grab it. We've got people who move them around for you. Please would you identify yourself and your business and direct the question to whichever panelist you think, or through myself, is up to you.
I actually think it's going to be for all of you. My name is Suzanne Styles. I have a training company called Makes You Think. I've actually sort of got a double question, so please excuse the length. In 2011, we brought a very, very prominent international gentleman to South Africa called Bob Proctor. We used an extremely reputable event company to put the event together. And we had a very specific brief for a person that we wanted at one of the events that we put together to speak. And we wanted her to be our MC, and we asked the company to acquire her. Through the event and through discussions with her, and completely unbeknownst to her, she actually happened to tell us what her rate was in a conversation. And we paid 150 times or percent onto her rate.
I need to work for you more often, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, only once. But what I wanted to say was, in terms of your question about the Speakers Bureau and wasting time, I think, Jacques, you said, are you guys all joined to 3 or 4 associations? Because surely if you get a brief for a style of speaker, then you would all have to pitch. But if it's a specific speaker, shouldn't the professional speaker or the person who is speaking as training only belong to one organisation? So it's like an agent, and therefore you're not doing double the work. Because otherwise I think you guys are getting screwed. Excuse the way I ask.
It's interesting, and I think that I'm going to ask Paul and Jacques to comment on that in a moment. I mean, there have been allegations, not least of which is now yours, throughout the years, that pricing has been marked up on speakers massively at so-called professional levels across the industry as well, which is why I think, to Lynn's point, the exit price. You know, I charge 36,000 Rand for a keynote. It's published on my website. I charge 7,000 euros overseas for the same talk, but I'm traveling a day in, a day out, and it works out to 3 times the equivalent value. Although if the Rand keeps declining, I'm just going to work more there and not here. But there is a public price on my price, and I think most of us at that level do so. Paul, let me ask you to comment on that first and foremost. Are you double pricing? Do you see it? Do you come across it?
It's out there, but we don't, it's not familiar territory to us. We have tried over the years to be as transparent as we can with that. We, I believe, are one of the only bureaus in the world that have, not that I'm trying to make a big thing of that, but that customers can bill direct. So in other words, we'll facilitate the whole process, but you actually put the money into the speaker's account. So there's no debating about who got what and so on. It's changed a little bit because of the way procurement works in some of the bigger organizations. So where they will not, you've got to register as a vendor, but to register 40 speakers as vendors, it just doesn't, it's just not something that they would even consider. But we started on that model, and we've sort of continued on that, so there is an element of trust that goes with it. But I think if you build your bureau, though, and you work around getting that percentage, you make it work. So it shouldn't really be needed.
But it's true to say as well, Paul, isn't it, that there is no association of speaker bureaus. Speakers tend to associate themselves with 1 or 2 bureaus over the course of who they like working with and how they work best with that bureau. I'm open to representation from any bureau in terms of what's out there, but there are preferential bureaus that we tend to work with, and I'm sure Justin and Jacques would concur on that as well. Should there be an association of speaker bureaus? I mean, you guys are so damn competitive anyway.
Well, we tried with the Professional Speakers Association. Were you also in that conversation? No, you weren't in the conversation. But we got a whole bunch of
years ago.
We got a whole bunch of speakers bureaus together and the PSA together, and quite frankly, it just didn't work. I mean, firstly, speakers have got massive egos, and speakers bureaus have politics. And that was the reality. We just couldn't get it together. And there were probably some bureaus that were being a bit naughty there anyway, so they didn't want to play with the group. So I think it would be worthwhile. But how the heck do you, I mean, how do you manage it? How do you control it? How do you enforce it? You can't enforce it. They're just going to say, you know what, if you don't like the way I do it, I'll just leave the association. I mean, we've had cases thank goodness, only 3 in the last 10 years, ethics cases where someone spoke about late ethics charges against some of our speakers. And when it comes to the crunch, they just leave. So we're not a policing. We can't police them, and life continues. And I think it's the same with the beer. It's a very difficult thing to set up. You could hope for the goodwill and the moral fiber to do it. But yeah, we have tried, and I think we could try again, because when we tried it a couple of years ago, we probably weren't that sophisticated anyway. So maybe our buyers are more sophisticated, as you know. So we maybe need to get more sophisticated too. Well, we have to get more sophisticated.
And maybe in many respects, this event and summit where we're talking about this today and everything else that stems from the second panel discussion later may help to spark some of this conversation amongst all of us, because I think we're probably one of the largest unregulated businesses in South Africa. There is no hint of regulation, just
yeah, and there aren't. You can't enforce many of these rules. On the other hand, somebody could make an argument and say, quite frankly, it's supply and demand. Whatever the client is prepared to pay, let them pay it. And if I add it on, it may not be perceived as extra value, but whatever touch I added to it. But we know that from within this industry, we know that is one of the frustrations of clients. We're never going to enforce this legally. But I think, to the question, what can we all do? I think what we can all do, and I know there's some bureaus who are doing this, and PCOs, is I think we need to talk about it as we're talking about it, but also I would urge you to talk to speakers and say, please know, I think I just did a job with Famous Faces, and there's a very clear contract, and there it is. We expect single exit price. That's in the contract, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure that's there. The point is that if PCOs, if we all ask, is this a single price? If we we need to educate one another. It's often out of ignorance. You'll see it with new speakers often who just think, oh, well, you're coming to me direct, I'm going to give you a discount. They just don't know any better. Now I didn't know when I first got into the industry.
And that's where the PSA can certainly help in that regard for emerging experts who speak coming into the marketplace.
Yeah.
Absolutely.